At first glance, this looks like a mini N64. And to be fair, it is a miniature N64, but this isn't a licensed product by Nintendo. Rather, it is made by a company called RetroFlag. Now, RetroFlag makes a bunch of these different types of cases for single board computers. And in this case, this one is specifically designed for use with the Raspberry Pi 5. Now, that's quite fitting because N64 emulation has been pretty challenging on lower end devices, and N64 emulation actually runs quite well on a Pi 5. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at the overall design and see exactly what RetroFlag was trying to go for, and then I'm going to give you my thoughts on whether or not this is worth the $30 price tag. Now, in the box itself, you're going to be getting the mini console itself, as well as an instruction manual that's going to have all of the different assembly instructions and how to get this thing connected. Inside of the package, you are also going to be getting an aluminum heatsink that you can attach to your Pi 5, as well as a fan for some active cooling. So really, this kit comes with everything that you're going to need other than the Raspberry Pi 5 and an SD card. And as I just mentioned, this kit costs $30, and in my opinion, that's actually a really good value for what you're getting here. This case looks incredible. It looks just like an original N64, with a few differences. So one of the big differences between this case and what you would expect on an original N64 console is going to be the 2 controller ports. Obviously, on an original N64, you would have had 4 controller ports, but RetroFlag opted to only put 2 on here. And I think the reason they did that is because of the scale. If you tried to jam in 4 USB ports along the front, I think that it would look a little bit off. But what RetroFlag did end up doing was actually including a little panel on the side that you can just pop right off. And you've got access to the additional 2 USB ports on the Raspberry Pi, as well as your Ethernet connection. Now next, they also did a functional reset button and power switch, and these are going to be working right out of the box. Effectively, there is a little harness inside, and when you connect that into the GPIO header, exactly where it needs to go, you've effectively got a safe shutdown system that's going to work right out of the box. Now, RetroFlag also did include that aluminum heatsink and built-in fan like I mentioned, and that's super important because you want to keep the temperatures down on a Raspberry Pi 5, especially when you're dealing with higher end emulation. Now, this is a Raspberry Pi 5, so you can run more advanced consoles on this thing than just N64, but given the form factor and what this actually is, I think I'm just going to focus on N64, and I'm going to have an SD card in here right along the bottom that is loaded up with only N64 titles. Now, getting this thing completely installed when you have a Raspberry Pi 5 in hand is actually pretty simple. The first thing that you're going to do is grab that heatsink and apply it to the Raspberry Pi 5. Next, you're going to want to wire up the fan so that way you've got your active cooling system in place, and then there's also a little connector that plugs directly into the GPIO header, and that is going to control your power and your reset switch. Next, we're going to grab our USB extension and plug that into the Raspberry Pi 5. And then at that point, we just need to mount our Pi down to the case so everything is nice and secure. Finally, we throw the bottom of the shell back together with the screws included, and you're pretty well done. You are ready for an SD card to dump in there and start playing around. Now, I decided to go ahead and build a recall box image specifically for this Pi, and for the purposes of what we're doing here, I don't think it makes that much of a difference. We're going to get good performance across most of the N64 titles that we play. But before we get into gameplay, I did want to talk about one more thing. What I actually like to do is grab one of these Retro Fighter Brawler 64 new controllers that they've released. Now, this one is the all-white one, but as you can see, it actually has the C-pad. It has your A/B buttons, your start, your D-pad, your analog. It is effectively a modern or redesigned N64 controller that works really well with the Raspberry Pi system. So all you need to do is plug it in, and it is registered as a controller, and it has the default setups. So that way you just need to make a couple tweaks in the setting for how you want your buttons mapped, but that's it. This actually plays and works really well for an N64 controller. Now jumping back into Recalbox, I went ahead with a very simple theme. We downloaded our box arts and our video snaps and kind of all the stuff that you have to tinker with when you're dealing with a Raspberry Pi 5. So if you are familiar with that, this should be no issue for you whatsoever. But that is something that I do need to mention because not everyone has used one of these Raspberry Pi products. And if you haven't, it can be a little bit overwhelming in order to figure out how to connect it into your network, to move your games over, and then also to do all of the configuration to make it look and feel kind of in sync and nice and pretty. But once all of that is done, then we are left with a plug and play N64 Mini console that actually does a really great job. So what I'm going to do is just show you guys a little bit of performance across some of the games so you can get a good idea of what this device is capable of doing with a Pi 5 and just how cool it looks next to the display. Well, and there you guys have it. That is some N64 running on a Raspberry Pi 5. Unsurprisingly, it is doing a good job. Performance is exactly what you would hope for, and it's probably one of the best ways to play or emulate N64 on a single board computer. So let's go ahead and jump into some pros and cons now. Now, on the pro side, it has an amazing retro design. This looks just like an N64. They've got all of the curves correct, the overall scale, everything looks as it should, obviously with the exception of those 4 USB ports that should be on the front. The next pro is going to be the front-facing USB ports because they're super practical. The functional power switch and reset button is a big pro as well. And finally, the last pro is that it has an excellent cooling system. You've got that aluminum heatsink and you've got that active cooling fan in there that should keep the board nice and cool while you're playing your games. Now on the con side, I'm going back to the design, and even though I said it's got an incredible design, and I guess a con would be that that it's only available in this blue, clear, transparent shell. Now this shell is going to look great if you are familiar with the Japanese release of the N64. They released their multiple colored consoles in this format, where you had the color up top, but then you had like a clear shell on the bottom. I actually do like that quite a bit, but I would say that I would have loved to see this released in multiple colors. They've already got the mold. This was done in the transparent blue. I would have loved to see an orange one, a green one, a pink one for that watermelon color. And honestly, I would have bought all of them just to have them on display because it looks really cool. And realistically, we're not getting an N64 Mini from Nintendo anytime soon. Now, another con is that there is no built-in cartridge slot for storage. Now, they do have this tiny little compartment over here that you can put your extra SD cards in, and that technically is a little storage compartment, but on a lot of their other devices, they actually had functional sections where you could kind of pop up the Pi Station, and that's where those SD cards could sit. Or if you're looking at the Super Pi case and you press the eject button, it would actually open it up and you can actually have your SD cards sitting in there. I've got one in there, you can see right there. So something like that would have been really nice to see on this console if there was a way to either add an actual physical cartridge there or something along those lines. Even some sort of magnetic one would have been a really cool touch. And then the final con is that it is a tinkering product. This is going to be something that you need to be somewhat familiar with a Raspberry Pi system. You need to understand how to load up your games, how to write an image to an SD card, and how to install things correctly, how to go into RetroArch and adjust the controller mapping so that way it matches the controller that you're using. There's a number of little things that you have to do to get this thing up and running. So if you are not the type of person who wants to tinker, this is probably not a product for you. So if you are a retro gaming enthusiast or an N64 fan, this could be a decent pickup for 30 bucks, plus the cost of a Raspberry Pi 5, which I think they're running anywhere between like 70 and 80 bucks now if you get the 8 gig model. But in any case, if you already own the Pi 5, this is a pretty decent valued case. The build quality is excellent. Everything about the design looks good. And honestly, I'm a big N64 guy. So if you are like me and you're looking for something that resembles an N64 to put in your collection of mini or classic consoles, this is a great choice. Now, as always, I will leave some links in the description down below for you guys to pick one up or just to learn a little bit more about it. But outside of that, I don't have much else for you. I do want to thank the team over at RetroFlag for sending this over to me. Certainly one of the best products I think that they've ever released, and I'm going to love this thing on the display stand. Outside of that, I don't have much else for you. Thank you guys so very much for watching, and I'll speak to you guys again real soon.